Well, resource consumption is of course one thing, but the important thing is to keep the natural capital intact. It's only when the capital is intact or developed that you can hope to get some results from it in a continuous, sustainable stream. So you have to keep it intact, and then you can hope for results for ecosystem services. Now the interesting thing is that you also can develop natural capital. For one thing, when you read all the definitions of green infrastructure, some definitions are taking green infrastructure as a factual thing, as a real thing. Other definitions are seeing green infrastructure as a kind of policy. And so when you see a kind of policy in it, it is a policy for developing green infrastructure and for managing natural capital. And I think this is the way forward. It is considered here and there, but not yet enough. For one thing, in Flanders, for example, we have a regulation that forbids to build constructions in the neighborhood of rivers where inundations are possible. And it's not really forbidden, but you have to take it in consideration, and you have to take a decision, an explicit decision as government before permitting this building to be built. Okay, that's one thing. But the other thing is that in the globality of spatial planning, Flemish spatial planning, adaptation is only a theoretical question, and in practice it's not really an object of policy. There are no real decisions that are taken in this or that direction, or not enough. Well, the first thing one has to say is that nowadays probably 90% of the funding is government money. I think this is still the case. People are having agreements or are asking for investments, and all the time the money is coming from government. Local government, national government, whatever, even European projects. But we should strive for situations where more private money is introduced into investments and into the delivering of ecosystem services. And there different schemes are possible. One scheme is that you really consider an investment as a private investment, and you organize a business case in which it is rentable for investors to put money into water investments. That's a case that has been applied for grey water infrastructure, and one could think about possibilities to introduce this for green infrastructure as well. The other possibility is to see it as a green infrastructure, to see it as a kind of a commons, a common thing around which you organize a club good, so a club, and it becomes a club good. And at that time, people will be willing to invest and to pay into ecosystem services because they are part of the club, and they are co-responsible for the management of what is in the club. And then one could think that one could generate more money for these kind of things. Well, our current water policy is nowadays still, to a large degree, defined by water policies that were invented 20 years ago or longer ago. A lot of the water policy is still, consists still of building of grey infrastructure. Still at this moment, people are seeing that they should change and they should introduce new forms of thinking. Systems thinking is coming to the foreground, and people are seeing that they cannot pay everything as was the case before. So now they also try to invent schemes to pay for ecosystem services. And this thinking is still in its beginning. Lots of people are discussing about it, but on the practical side, a lot still has to happen. We need real management of these schemes. We need arrangements. We need to organize property rights into that direction. And we need to bring certainty, to bring clarity in the situation, so that all parties that are concerned are prepared to pay, and the other side, once they are paid, they are prepared to do the things that should be done. And so nowadays I can't say we are really prepared, we are really ready for the challenges, but we are coming to it, we are beginning to take on these challenges, and I think the time is ripe to bring water policy to this next level. Well, I think that all scales are relevant. At all scales, something has to happen. At a scale of the field, that is where the concrete measure happens. So this scale is definitely relevant. This is the reality, the practical reality. At the same time, you also need to consider the scale of the farm, because there, or the business, because there is the actor that will decide to put the right management in place or not. So that scale is very relevant. Can it be fit in his business or her business to perform? That's a big question. The next scale is of course also relevant, the landscape scale, because if one farmer or one actor takes decisions such and another farmer or actor takes decisions so, and it's not coordinated at landscape level, then you get mixed results. So this level is also very important. But then you come to the region or the country or the state. They have to create conditions in which people can take right decisions. If they don't create those conditions, then they are nowhere. And then probably also Europe is very important, because we live in a common market, and this market makes that people do want the same level playing conditions, and so Europe has to bring these level playing conditions into the field between the different states. Well, normally the line is where the norm is, the public norm, the public standard. Whatever is under the standard and has to get to the standard, that is not to be paid for. There the polluter pays principle is applicable. Once you get above the standard, then then one can think about being paid by someone. But then the next question is, who would be willing to pay? That's a real question. And there different things are at hand. One, the person that pays must see some benefit in paying money. Secondly, he or she should know that the others that would be paying will be willing to pay as well, because otherwise you're the only one that pay. So those two conditions are very important to make people willing to pay.